I hope Swayman starts the series and they can figure out.
I think you just contradicted yourself because who's out playing who right now?
No, I'm not. I'm saying I think you need to see what he can do to start a playoff series. I've been pretty consistent with that all year. Um,
Well, you have, but you're
but I
saying
think
like they.
what I would do if I were going to rotate is I would just start. If you're going to rotate, I would just every time they lose, you go with the other goalie. You know, and that way you get 2 losses with each goalie per series. That's pretty even. That's pretty fair. And you let the goalie keep going if the team keeps winning. Welcome to another edition of the Pucks with Haggs podcast, powered by Prize Picks, the exclusive daily fantasy partner of the CLNS Media Network. I believe this is the 80th episode of the Pucks with Haggs podcast. I'm your host, Joe Haggerty. You can find my work at joehaggerty.substack.com. Sign up for a premium membership. You get all of my NHL and Bruins writing sent straight directly to your inbox. I also write columns after every Bruins game for the Boston Sports Journal at bostonsportsjournal.com. Make sure you pay close attention around playoff time because we will be ramping up the coverage at Boston Sports Journal with the Bruins hitting the playoffs. So you're going to be able to check daily to see what I have to say about the Bruins. With me today, Mick Colageo. Mick, please tell everybody out there where they can see your work aside from handing the Dufresne Trophy over to David Pastrnak before the game. You got some FaceTime on Nesson last night. I'm sure you got some texts and some messages on Twitter from your friends and fans.
Hey, I got a text from a cousin, and I thought they only watch Rangers games. Let me say that like a New Yorker, Ranger games. Yeah, you can find me on BostonHockeyNow.com on Sundays with my column. I blog home games on my Rink Rap blog, and I link that to X and Facebook. And I appear in seasonal issues of the Hockey News writing about the Bruins.
Excellent, excellent. And let's also thank our sponsor, Prize Picks, largest daily fantasy sports platform in North America and the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Instead of battling thousands of other players that could be pros or sharks, you simply pick more or less than on 2 to 6 player stat projections and watch the winnings roll right in. For example, David Pastrnak, shots on net, or in that game against Carolina, giveaways. I think he had 5 of them, so I'm sure that's a stat projection you might be able to throw out there. Going in the other direction, Charlie McAvoy hits, block shots, goalies, I'm sure it saves, all these different categories. It's pretty fun and simple. Download the Prize Picks app today and use the code CLNS for a first deposit match of up to $100. That's download the Prize Picks app today and use the code CLNS for a first deposit match of up to $100. Pick more, pick less. It's that easy. All right, Mick, this is going to be a pretty free-form episode. Just, I guess, thoughts on that Carolina game. Yeah, you saw it. I was not there, but I watched it on replay. Not much to watch. That was, as good as they had been in the previous 6 or so games since Monty had gone at them at practice and told them to wake the bleep up, and they definitely responded. They just did not have it last night. Carolina was much better than they were in Carolina when they had played him the week before. There was several weird goals that were scored by Carolina in that game. And usually when weird goals are scored, I feel like the goalie has something to do with that, and the goalie's not good enough. And I felt that was the case with Swayman last night. But just in general, I mean, that last goal they gave up to make it 4-1, the shorthanded one, was just awful. And that's a play you make if you want to lose a game. Just too easy, giving it up to Carolina there. That also underscores the problem the Bruins are having, major problems they're still having on the power play. Just your thoughts on that game last night and where that fits in with what you've seen recently with the Bruins.
Going into the game, I felt like watch out for the let up.
Yep.
I felt like a scheduled loss to me because Carolina was going to bring it, having lost in their building to the Bruins so recently.
And they were terrible too, like terrible first period in that game that basically lost them the game down in Carolina. They pretty much
that Brindamore was going to have them ready to go, and I thought that things would unravel sooner than they did. The Bruins, Monty liked their first period. He said that when Carolina upped the ante in the second and pushed harder, The
Yep.
Bruins were not up to it. He said the Bruins went to push back in the third, but after they gave up the third goal, that was it. Lights out. Everybody was done. I sort of felt all along that, hey, this is the first game in a while that the Bruins haven't needed. And coming home on a Tuesday night to play Carolina, which is a pain in the butt, it doesn't get you going. It just kind of is a chore. And they've done their work. They know where they are. They've been examining their body of work. They've been talking about it as a group of games. They've been looking at it, admiring it, polishing it, and saying, we're ready for the playoffs now. We weren't, now we are. And now tonight, they just weren't good enough. I mean, last night, they weren't just good enough to hang with a team that meant it more than they did, to borrow a Mike Milbury phrase from '93. And when they get swept by Buffalo after a 50-win season and a great month of March. And then sometimes a team comes in and just cares more than you do. And if you're both pretty good, it's going to come through, and that's what it was. And the Bruins were not the least bit fazed by it. That, like, yeah, they were better at it than we were for more parts of the game, but they weren't at all like, oh God, the sky's falling or anything. There was nothing there with the Bruins, and they weren't really engaging the power play questions very much. It was more like, yeah, we got to look at it. My power play attitude is pretty much, I know I keep going to this back to this one because it's the ultimate example, but when the Devils finished 30th out of 30 teams in 2002-03 season and won the Stanley Cup, I looked at those numbers this morning. They scored 36 power play goals in the 02-03 season. The Ducks, who went 7 with them in the final, scored 58. The Devils scored something like 14 power play goals in 24 playoff games. So they're above one every other game, slightly above one every other game, whereas before they were like well below one every other game. And so I'm thinking, like, okay, the power play wasn't great in the postseason, but it was clutch. And there were guys who became weapons that really weren't stars in the league prior to, and we actually weren't going forward either, and more like role players. And I just think that when the playoffs come around, coaches find ways to reinvent things. And so to me, the power play is not a crisis for the Bruins playoff wise. I feel like 5-on-5 hockey is largely what wins playoff series, and power play goals, you need one when you need one. Like a goal, you need a big save when you need one.
I would agree with you to some extent, but it depends on the team, right? Some teams are way more dependent, or much more dependent on power play offense and power play scoring than other teams. You better be 5-on-5 dominant, to your point, if your power play is going to stink in the playoffs. And I'm not going to compare the Bruins to that Devils team, because I don't think they're as good 5-on-5. They're as good defensively as that team. Yes, their goaltending is good, but I think they do need more power play offense, and they need more of a power play threat than maybe some other teams that could.
Right, because they're not going to be a dominant 5-on-5 team in the playoffs. They'll hold their own. They'll hold their own 5-on-5.
That's not good enough. Holding your own if your power play is going to be a liability, like, that's a problem, and that's why I think there's a concern level with the Bruins. Is just because they're not good enough to just say, all right, that power play sucks, we're going to win despite that. I just don't think they're good enough to do that.
I think that's why they signed Shattenkirk.
When you look at some of the numbers, Pasternak has 1 goal in 30 games since the All-Star break, 1 power play goal. Yeah. Brad Marchand has 0 power play goals since the All-Star break. Your best players are not doing jack squat on the power play and haven't been for a long time. Like, to me, that's when warning bells start going off, and you start saying, uh-oh, I think there's a problem here, and there's something going on that they've had 30 games. They've had months now to address, to fix, to adjust, whatever they need to do to make it more viable.
They can't fix it, is what you're saying. Yeah.
Well, yeah, that first power play unit, they're having issues, and they have not made the coaching staff and the players have not made the requisite adjustment to make it better. And that's a problem, and that's an issue. And I take heart in the fact that, like, lately they've held leads in the third period. They've extended them. It seems like, to some degree at least, they've addressed that. Monty says that they're a maturing team, and they've kind of matured into figuring that out. And I buy some of that. I think they're building confidence in that area.
It's the best stretch of hockey of the season for them, as a grinding team trying to play hard and play playoff style hockey. No question, this is their best. And so can they bring that to the playoffs and sustain it when other teams are going to push harder?
Yep.
That's the question. How will they hold up? I'm looking at the left side of the defense, and I'm looking at the forecheck to see if it's physical enough to cause stress on opposing defensemen. Retrievals, cycles. We know they can cycle. Can they consistently cause problems on the retrievals? That's what I'm looking at. And
Yep.
and if that isn't there, I don't give a crap if they're hitting 50% on the power play. They're not going very far.
No, that's all true. But I agree. But and that's a non-negotiable when it comes to like having success in the playoffs is doing some of those things. You ready to get in on all the playoff action that's coming up? Basketball playoffs a few weeks away, hockey playoffs, Stanley Cup playoffs, the best time of year, a few weeks away. Well, why don't you go and get the Prize Picks app? Prize Picks is the largest daily fantasy sports platform in North America and the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Instead of battling thousands of other players that could be pros or sharks, you simply pick more or less than on 2 to 6 player stat projections and watch the winnings roll right in. You can get in on the playoff action and win up to 100 times your money on Prize Picks as you and the world's best players take the game to a new level during basketball's upcoming playoffs, during the Stanley Cup playoffs as well. As I mentioned, you can win up to 100 times your money on Prize Picks with as little as 4 correct picks. You can turn $10 into $1,000 with basketball, hockey, and anything else today on Prize Picks, America's #1 fantasy sports app. It has something for every sports fan, from basketball to hockey to League of Legends and everything in between. You can pick LeBron, Connor McDavid, and Jude Bellingham all in the same entry. How cool is that? You're going to want to get involved right now. David Pastrnak, you can do goals, you can do shots, maybe you can do turnovers because sometimes he has a lot of those in the game as well. You just pick more or less than. It's fun and pretty simple. Download the Prize Picks app today and use the code CLNS for a first deposit match of up to $100. That's download the Prize Picks app today and use the code CLNS for a first deposit match of up to $100. Pick more, pick less. It's that easy. But I was not worried about the power play for a long time. I was not sort of panicked about it, or like, they're not going to find the answer, or feeling like it was a liability in a black hole, feeling like it was a legit problem. But like, as it's gone on and as they have not come out of it and as they have not figured it out,
30 games is a long time.
I think the power play is an issue. It's been going on too long. I think it's a real problem with this team. And I think, to your point, Mick, the fact that they were kind of brushing it off last night and not really giving much credence to anything about it, that tells me that they know it's an issue too, and they don't want to talk about it. And they're kind of like hoping it turns around or hoping something changes. And they at this point, they don't have any ansers.
It's a reasonable conjecture that they don't really have the answer.
No,
because if they did, we would have seen it on the ice by now.
It's clear they don't. And when you go beyond Pasternak's one-timer on the power play, that top power play unit does not have enough guys that are willing to shoot and willing to be threats to score and make it viable. And I think when Monty broke it down earlier, like a month ago, and said we need more players with a shoot first mentality and a shooter's mentality, to at least have the threat that they're going to shoot the puck on that top power play unit, I think he was right. And I think that's something that penalty kills have read, is that they're trying to make plays and they're trying to pass constantly, cross ice passing and everything else, that they're not willing to actually be the scoring threat aside from Pastrnak. And that becomes a problem when penalty kill focuses all of their coverage on making sure 88 can't shoot it from the dot and can't shoot a one-timer from anywhere around there and can't get it in a good spot. And that, there's more than that, obviously, because you and I have seen it too. The entries are a problem. At times they can't even get set up. They're not even.
Once in a great while, Pasta scores the beauty of Ovi goal, and right. And when he does, my heart sinks because I'm thinking, oh no, that means 30 more games are going to keep trying to make this play.
Right.
Right. So because we've seen it once. There's no reason he can't keep doing it. Yes, there is reason he can't keep doing it because everybody's trying to make this play now, and everything funnels there. And you got to be great at it in order to make it work because it's so obvious. It's sending out a press release that you're going to do this. And so I would like to see them try. I remember in 11, they did something funny little thing with the power play when they were struggling on the power play in the regular season. And they did this funny little thing where they put Krejci and Bergeron on the left side of the ice, both
Yeah.
right-hand shots, and
Yep.
they had them rotate. So one guy would be running the power play from the left wing corner or half wall somewhere there, and then the other guy would be rotating out to the point, so he stick inside. Now, Bergeron doesn't have a one-timer at this point in his career. He didn't develop this for probably 3 or 4 or 5 years. And so as this is going on, what it did was what kind of like Carolina did in 06 when they had Eric Stahl when he was really young, and they also had Doug Waite when he was healthy. They could have two guys. They overloaded the right. And what they did was they overloaded the right side of the ice, and they had like a double fulcrum. So you didn't have one point person to the power play working it either behind the net the way Gretzky did or off to the side of the net the way Crosby did and juniors. They had two guys along the sidewall on the right so that you couldn't you couldn't like funnel your box toward one. And you'd find your seams when you don't have that one. You have 2 points you have to decide is going to be the playmaking point here, and you have to align your box to that. I think that, I wouldn't mind seeing them try some things here, and maybe maybe we won't until the playoffs. The thing that I absolutely love about the playoffs is coach is so resistant to doing drastic things during the regular season.
We'll
Do
do
drastic things
it.
after 1 or 2 playoff games.
Oh,
It's
yeah.
amazing how much happens on a coaching scale, strategy wise, X's and O's or whatever they're going to do, personnel deployment. It's amazing how much can change in 1 or 2 playoff games that you will not see for 25 regular season games.
I agree. And honestly, I don't think there was enough of that sort of urgency last year with Montgomery in that series against Florida, vis-a-vis, putting Swayman in, making earlier in the series, doing some different things that I think they needed to do in that series. And like bottom line, I don't think they were going to win the cup last year anyway. Bergeron's back was hurt. Like a bunch of guys were banged up. Like they weren't going to make it through 2 months, but I think they could have won certainly that series against Florida with a few different moves potentially. Even though that Florida was a worthy opponent, as they showed when they went to the
You let the more physical team off the mat,
Yep.
and they're going to beat you every time. And the Bruins had that series in 5 games. They had a put away goal on Pasta's stick on a 2-on-1 in the third period of game 5. He did what every other Bruins seemed to be doing, and he was the one guy we didn't think would do it, and that's pass to a covered guy rather than take the shot. All he has to do is score that goal, and everybody goes home.
Yeah, well, you could say that about Marchand even more so. Like he had
the breakaway. I don't have a problem with because he thought he saw the clock. He knew the clock was ticking.
I don't have a problem with it, but like he could have finished the play. Like it was a tough play, but like great players make tough plays, and that's how you have to win playoff series.
Yeah, I have a hard time with that one. Just because of the clock over his shoulder. Maybe, and maybe what Bob knew with the clock, maybe he played him a certain way to discourage a shot. I don't know. But anyway, bottom line is you had your chance against a more physical team and you didn't get the job finished and it got into a street fight.
But maybe it doesn't even get to that point if Swayman is playing in Game 5 instead of Ullmark. Who knows? This is
another question altogether.
This is
what
my
really
point,
went on with Linus?
That's my point about saying you're not
there?
making. That's my point about saying you're not making bold moves. Is I think that was the bold move to make in that series at that point, and they didn't do it. And I think there was too much standing pat with Montgomery in that series. And while Paul Maurice was coaching, he was coaching his ass off to try to win that series.
I go back to before the series and Ullmark's season-ending injury, I know that they talked it down, but I'm not buying it. If that was the regular season, there's no way Ullmark would have gotten those starts.
Yeah.
So why didn't you continue with the theory that you would have had in the regular season? They talked to everybody and everybody's saying he can go. That shouldn't have been good enough. It wouldn't have been good enough in the regular season. Why was it good enough in the playoffs? So you had a great backup goalie there, a very tandem number 2, an excellent understudy. Start the series with him. See what, let be a team, live up to what you preached all season. That was my biggest issue with that whole scenario.
Well, I hope they do that this time around. Certainly. I hope Swayman starts the series and they can figure out.
I think you just contradicted yourself because who's out playing who right now?
No, I'm not. I'm saying I think you need to see what he can do to start a playoff series. I've been pretty consistent with that all year.
Well, you have, but I
think what I would do if I were going to rotate is I would just start. If you're going to rotate, I would just every time they lose, you go with the other goalie. And that way you get 2 losses with each goalie per series. That's pretty even. That's pretty fair. And you let the goalie keep going if the team keeps winning. And I think that's also fair. And I think
Almark's been playing better than Swayman for since the trade deadline.
No, and as a whole, yes, and the numbers have been good for him. But Swayman's shown plenty. Like he won a game against Florida, he won 2 games against Toronto. He played well up until last night. The problem was last night he was not good, and that is a little bit of an issue. But also, it's the last few games of the year. Pastrnak had 5 giveaways and was god awful last night. Are you going to not play Pastrnak because he was bad in that game? No. I think they've shown what they've needed to show to this point as a team. They're probably going to clinch the Atlantic. It's just a matter of time. So, I'm not going to dissect too much of what I've seen in these last few games. I just think we've seen, and I've been consistent with this.
So you're telling me that you're going more with Swayman's body of work season long over Allmark's last.
That's part of it. I'm also going with we have yet to see Swayman put in a fair postseason situation to see how he will perform under that pressure and to see what he can bring, instead of putting him in unfair positions like Game 7 of last year's series, or putting him in unfair positions before, like he gets thrown in the 2 years ago in Carolina. We've seen enough. This is my point: is we've seen enough out of Linus Ullmark to develop some opinions and thoughts and analysis on his postseason performances. He is not a great playoff goalie at this point. He's had a couple of moments where he's had some decent games. He looks like he can't handle the workload mentally and physically over the course of a long series where he's playing every other day. His numbers are atrocious in the postseason. I think he's shown times when he plays out of character and he does things that he doesn't do during the regular season and the postseason. I think that's problematic. I think that, to me, is more of a mental thing than a physical thing, where he does things that are, out of character for him, like too frenetic, too active. He does things where he's taking himself out of the play.
Tkachuk's overtime goal.
There was a bunch. There was like 3
on the Grizzly retrieval.
There was 2 or 3 plays like that where he took himself out of the play and gave Florida an easy goal, and he never did that during the regular.
I have a hard time interpreting anything about Linus outside of the context of the injury.
Yeah, I don't give players that out.
That said, what is there any in between for you? Like, let's just say, since Ullmark's been the better goalie for the last month, would you consider starting him in the series, get ahead in the series, but stay with the tandem, go back and forth, and get them both in?
I think any of that is fine, but I would definitely.
But you don't want to start Ullmark because you're afraid you're going to go down because you don't believe in him as a playoff goalie. No. That's pretty much what you're saying, right?
No, I don't at all. I think we've seen enough out of him. We haven't seen enough out of Swayman in the playoffs, and maybe it'll be the same thing. But at least give him the game 1 start, see what he can do with it, and if he plays like he did, down the stretch, you can just go with Ullmark in game 2. And like I said, if I were doing a playoff rotation goalie wise, I would not be doing you start game 1, you start game 2, you start, go back and forth each game. I would not do that.
You just say you start game 1.
I would let them play until they lose. I would say you're getting the net in game 1. You can stay in the net as long as the team keeps winning. I think that's the fairest way to do it. And then if they lose, Ullmark goes in game 2, and you say the same thing.
That's very early 70s of you.
Well, why not? Nobody's doing that stuff now.
We do have Factor Meals to help us out. America's #1 ready-to-eat meal kit when it does get busy, when it does get crazy, when we do need a quick meal. They fuel you up fast with flavorful and nutritious ready-to-eat meals delivered straight to your door. Takes less than 2 minutes to cook them. They're fresh, never frozen, meals ready in 2 minutes, like I said. They have calorie-conscious options, going upscale with some of the things they're offering now, like surf and surf meal options, roasted garlic, filet mignon, and shrimp, and Cajun spiced shrimp and salmon, which is right in my wheelhouse. This is the kind of stuff I'm all about. So it's got everything for everybody. There's 34 plus chef prepared, dietitian approved weekly options for meals. You can get snacks, you can get breakfast items. Like it's a great deal. So if you want to get Factor meals, go to factormeals.com/Haggs50 and use the code Haggs50 to get 50% off of your first box. It's a great deal. I've tried it. It's fantastic. I recommend it to you. We love these ready to make meal kits, especially when we're on the go with our kids. So one more time, that's factormeals.com/Haggs50 to get 50% off your first box. You won't be sorry if you go to Factor Meals. It gets the Haggs thumbs up seal of approval.
We have a tweet here, a tweet of the week, Mick, from CMAC781310. Tampa is going to be a real problem for whoever draws them in the first round, and it's looking like the Bruins. Yes, yes, and yes. If there were a team that, if I were a Bruins fan, or if I were handicapping the series, that I would not want the Bruins to play in the first round, it would be Tampa Bay. And I think it's going to be a real problem for them in the first round of the playoffs. Vasilevsky, Braden Point gives them all kinds of fits. Nikita Kucherov is just so damn good. Stamkos obviously brings what he brings, the steadiness, the playoff experience. They have a big, strong D-core that is able traditionally to keep the Bruins away from the front of the net, headed by Victor Hedman. They're not what they were when they were winning cups, but they are certainly good enough.
They haven't won anything without McDonough and Sergachev, and they won't have either.
Yep.
Because McDonough plays for Nashville now, and Sergachev, Cooper says they probably need to win 1 or 2 rounds before that becomes a serious question.
Yep.
But they're pretty thrilled that he's skating.
I don't think they need McDonough or Sergachev to beat the Bruins in the first round. I think they have.
Maybe not. But I think they need them. I think they need a big 3 to win the Stanley Cup. And
Stanley Cup, yes. I'm talking about the first round against the Bruins. I think,
and something. My attitude is, I'd rather get them now than get them in the third round, for instance, because Tampa didn't win a series last year. Hasn't won the cup since the shortened. Their last their 22 they did win in Colorado to push this to 6 when they were all banged up, which was very admirable on their part. So they were a great team for a few years there. Unfairly positioned to win the 2020, which was a joke. But
what have the Bruins won? I mean, we can put it on Tampa and say they haven't won this, and this. What have the Bruins done recently?
Good question. So but the less is more Bruins. I'd rather they got to throw this. Tampa's been their daddy for a while. Mm-hmm. They gotta throw them off their back. I'd rather get them now. And I'm kind of stubborn about the Maple Leafs. I feel like there's just so much ability there, and they're so sick of losing that sooner or later they're going to become the Red Sox.
Do you really think they're sick of losing, Mick? Those guys all make 10, 11, $12 million a year. The Toronto media kisses their ass and tells them they're the best thing since sliced bread, even though they haven't won a goddamn thing. They're
the Red Sox.
All they care about is Austin Matthews trying to score 70 goals. They don't care about them actually doing anything in the postseason. Like, everybody's going to go home happy if Austin Matthews puts up another great statistical season where they're playing run and gun hockey and not caring about who's in goal or who's playing defense.
I don't think they feel that way. I think that this is sort of just a lollipop for them to suck on until they finally do what they think this team is capable of. And I do think that Riley's the best version of himself he's ever been. I do think that Giordano plays younger than he is, and I think Labushkin will help them.
I think you're reading too much of the Toronto Globe and Mail. I think you're reading too much of the Toronto Globe and Mail up there.
I wish I did read more of the Globe and Mail. I like that paper, but I know I'm not buying into the party line that we can forget about the Leafs. They did beat the Lightning last year. Yeah, they did it dirty. Bunting knocked Chernak out, and that broke up the big 3 for Tampa. And
you're not trying to tell me you would rather have the Bruins face the Leafs and the Lightning in the first round than the Leafs, are you?
Yeah.
Are you serious?
I'm not saying that they're going to win either series. I'm pretty pessimistic across the board, really.
Yeah.
And I'm not down on the Bruins. I'm not down on the Bruins. I feel like this is the
Those are
grittiest
both
version
two-
of them in the Don Sweeney era.
Those are both very
They've had a
difficult
great
first round
season.
draws. Those are both very difficult first round draws.
They
for any
are.
question about it.
I don't like any of these first round. The only way that would like a first round draw is if they got the Capitals or,
The Red Wings or somebody.
Yeah, well, I don't know. Even the Red Wings with Yzerman, and somehow he's turned them into a team that gave the Bruins fits this year. So it's a weird season that way. And I can imagine the Bruins beating anybody in the first round. I can imagine them losing to anybody in the first round. So Mick, what are you doing on this podcast? Go home. I get it. It's a tough one. At the end of the day, I can't see the Bruins going deep if they don't match up on the left side of the ice. Well, let's see what happens when the puck gets dumped, soft dumps on that side, when Lindholm's going back, when Grizz is going back, and how soon will it be before Wotherspoon's playing with McAvoy. All this stuff, is Pete going to go over that side of the ice when he's a right shot? Are they going to be in desperate situations? I don't know. Are they going to force it? Are they going to cause stress on other Ds?
I think they'll be perfectly fine on the left side if Lindholm is playing with McAvoy in a super pairing where they can play 30 minutes a night. I think that's fine. It's not coincidental that they did that and they all of a sudden played much better against all these good teams and won all these good games, and the defense was good and they weren't allowing as many goals. A big part of that was because they put Lindholm and McAvoy together, and I think they found something that they're going to use in the playoffs, and I think it's going to work. I don't think that's the issue. I look at is the Bruins are going to give us what they're going to give us, right? They're going to be a team that is going to be able to score a decent amount, not enough to separate from other teams, not enough to not have like 1-goal leads in the third period or like tight games where it's up for grabs in the third period. They've played better defensively, especially lately when they put those two together in a monster top pairing. Their special teams are obviously, the penalty kill is good. The power play is not, but they're going to get stellar goaltending. They're going to be in it against all these teams. I think it's going to be very competitive. The difference is Andrei Vasilevsky for the Lightning versus the goaltending that Toronto has, Victor Hedman and some of the defensemen that Tampa Bay has versus what they have in Toronto. Toronto is not built for the playoffs, not built to win in the playoffs. They are built to be a fun, entertaining team that plays run and gun, scores goals hockey during the year. Maybe once in a while they can outscore a team in the playoffs and win a series. But by and large, they're not going to win in the playoffs because they're not built for the playoffs. And because those players, their best players, do not want to grind to win games in the playoffs. They don't know how to do it. They don't want to do it. And I think we've consistently seen that over the years. Austin, I love Mitch Marner. I think he's a very skilled player. I think he's tough for his size, like all that stuff. Austin Matthews does not want to grind in the playoffs. William Nylander does not want to grind in the playoffs. Those guys do not want to do what it takes to win postseason hockey. And the problem is they got paid before they won. So they've already got it made. I don't think the hunger is there for them like it is for a lot of other players to get it done in the postseason. And the fact that they've been whipped dogs over the years where everybody's told them they suck in the playoffs and they can't do it, and that they haven't responded more strongly than they have in any of these postseasons. Like, when are they going to do it? At 10, 15 years in, or they finally going to?
Well, they remind me a little bit about the Bruins. They address these things in dribs and drabs and little addendums that we get, little improvements, subtle things. And so if those improvements add up, if there's 25 pennies, you might get a quarter out of it. I don't know. I just see so much talent there that I'm wondering if, in as much as we think that the Bruins can continue to shore up areas that have been weak for the last several years and make them suddenly more viable to make a deep run, then how much more should we believe it of an uber talented team like the Toronto Maple Leafs, which have made similar little tweaks?
Yeah, but they're not talented in the same areas that the Bruins are. Like, they're built for the regular season, Toronto. They're not built for the playoffs. They do not have a goalie that is going to be able to outplay another team's goalie. The defense that they have is too old in parts.
That's a situation will always be there for them. They'll have to prove it,
of course,
because they're not going to be a team that can win with different goalies like the Chicago Blackhawks could.
No.
We've seen it other times too. I mean, sometimes a goalie isn't the star and you win. So can they be that team? I need to see a little more with the defense from them to believe it. So I get what you're saying. It's not like I haven't, processed some of this. I just think that they remind me so much of the Red Sox 20 years
Yes,
ago
of course.
that sooner or later I feel like something's got to give. And especially in that market. So so I don't like playing Toronto if I was the Bruins. One of the teams that scares me is the Carolina Hurricanes. I just feel like for all the intangibles that you identify with the Maple Leafs, I think of the opposite is true of the Carolina Hurricanes.
Yeah.
And I feel like that team is the team that flies under the radar all season long. Nobody likes to talk about them because they just don't generate that buzz either because of the city or because of the personnel. You'd think that maybe Brent Burns would do more, move that needle more. It doesn't really happen. And yet that team, the NHL wouldn't like a Nashville, Carolina final, but I wouldn't rule it out,
Yeah. Well, I think Carolina is the opposite of Toronto in a lot of ways. Like, I think it's their time. I think they're built for the playoffs in a lot of ways, and I think it's their time now. And they feel like it's their time to win. Like, some of those guys aren't, early 20s anymore. They're in the primes of their career. They've been there a while. They've got a lot of playoff experience, but they've fallen short consistently. They're well coached. Like, I think they've got a lot of the elements in place to win. I agree with you. I think they're a team to watch out for in the playoffs. But the Eastern Conference is going to be good. There's a lot of good teams. The Rangers are good. The Hurricanes.
Rangers are very good.
The Atlantic Division's bringing.
I have my questions of whether they're built for the playoffs.
The Atlantic Division's bringing 3 teams that are legit, and the Bruins, the 4 teams, the Panthers, the Bruins, the Lightning, and the Leafs, are all good teams. So I think the playoffs are going to be fantastic. But
it should be a lot of fun watching other series. I'll watch the Bruins and I'll agonize like I did since I was a child. But I will enjoy the crap out of watching the other series turn each other's lives inside out and watch coaches go into panic meetings and suddenly come out with completely different lineups and trying to do different things than they did all season. That's the blast of the first round of the playoffs.
Yeah, no doubt. Wild West, as John Cooper called it, for the Tampa Bay Lightning coach. And the last word on this is just to the tweet. The person that sent the tweet to me, I think the Lightning are the worst matchup for the Bruins. I think they are going to lose in the first round if they play the Lightning in a first round matchup. I think it's their kryptonite. I think there's too many players on that team that can step up in the postseason and have been problematic for the Bruins in the past. And Vasilevsky is the ultimate eraser as well. All right, Mick, thank you very much for joining us. Prize Picks, let's also thank them, the largest daily fantasy sports platform in North America and the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Instead of battling thousands of other players that could be pros or sharks, you simply pick more or less than on 2 to 6 player stat projections and watch the winnings roll right in. It's fun and pretty simple. Download the Prize Picks app today and use the code CLNS for a first deposit match of up to $100. That's download the Prize Picks app today. Very easy to download. I did it a few weeks ago. Easy to use, and use the code CLNS for a first deposit match of up to $100. Pick more, pick less. It's that easy. Mick, thank you very much for joining us.
Pleasure.
All right. Thanks, everybody, for listening. We'll see you at the rink.